All right, here we go. Welcome into the Stone Shield Show. We are here. It is Wednesday, February 11th, about a half hour after we normally gather here at the show. Again, just a reminder, some housekeeping stuff here. Schedule's a little bit wonkier here right now. We technically won't be live tomorrow, Friday, and Monday. But we will have a show that premieres on YouTube at 11 o'clock. So it'll be as if we are live, and the podcast will still go out later in the day. So really no adjustments there on your end, and that, again, will be at 11. So that'll be normal time over the course of the next few days. Some off-season stuff here at Chatterbox Sports, some things that we are working through. Also, I will be out of town for a couple of days there as well, so that's kind of the reason behind the scheduling change. But again, it really isn't much of a difference as the content still goes out, and we will still be premiering our show at 11 o'clock tomorrow, so make sure you tap in for that. I did my first Cincinnati Bengals 7-round mock draft, so that is going to premiere tomorrow. I don't love it, but I like it. PFF, the draft simulator, gave me a B+. Not going to lie, at the very beginning, I had to restart it a couple of times. Why? Because the nightmare scenario was unfolding at that number 10 overall selection. What I mean by that is, all the stud defenders were gone by the point the Bengals picked. So we'll do that exercise. We're going to do it multiple times. Again, that was 1.0. But we'll eventually do it where all those guys are gone, and we're sitting here going, okay, who are you going to pick at number 10 overall if all those stud defensemen are indeed off the board, which – couple of weeks ago, we're having this conversation, and I was like, there's no way, right? One of these guys is going to fall to number 10. But as time goes on, you see more mock drafts starting to come out. Caleb Downs seemingly is getting mocked more accurately than he was when certainly the Bengals season wrapped up. I think people are waking up smelling the coffee saying, he's a safety, but he's a top 5 pick. Starting to worry that Caleb Downs is going to be off the board for Cincinnati. But that will premiere tomorrow. Interested to know your thoughts on that. And that clip will also go out on YouTube there as well. So get in the comment section. Give me some feedback. My mentions on Twitter very much open as well if you want to provide any feedback on that front. Again, 1.0 goes out tomorrow. So also we are going to talk about what Paul Dehner had to say. He released his this morning. He calls it 0.5 just as the first 4 picks in the first 4 rounds. Bengals, of course, don't have a 5th-round pick. Lost that in the Flacco trade. Have 2 6th and a 7th as of now. Hopefully that pick selection goes up and increases by 1 after they tag and trade Trey Hendrickson, but we will see. And Dehner calls it 0.5 because free agency, of course, hasn't happened yet, and depending on how aggressive the Bengals are in free agency and depending on what positions they address in free agency, that certainly will impact the positions in which they select in the NFL draft. So I get that. I understand that. But we'll roll through what Dehner had to say with his 4 picks. I'll give some feedback there. There's a world, as I just mentioned, where the Bengals are picking at 10, and you're sitting there looking around going, oh, boy, what do we do here in this spot? So we'll talk about that. We're going to lead off today's show with some Cincinnati Reds burning questions. We broke down Mark Sheldon's opening day projection on yesterday's show. See Trent Rosecrans, who covers the Cincinnati Reds for The Athletic. He broke down his 3 burning questions for the Cincinnati Reds this offseason, I guess spring training, I should say, as they go into the regular season at the end of March. And we've talked about all these 3 things in the past, but I do think it's worth bringing back up and discussing them a little bit more in further detail. Also, Brian Callahan officially will not be back in Cincinnati. He has been hired as the quarterback coach for the New York Football Giants, pass game coordinator there as well. So all of a sudden, John Harbaugh is putting together the staff in New York, and you got some veteran coaches all over the place. He's got a quarterback coach and a pass game coordinator, and Brian Callahan, of course, was the OC here in Cincinnati, was the head coach for a cup of coffee, essentially, with the Tennessee Titans. He's got Matt Nagy as the OC. He's got head coaching experience. Greg Roman's a senior offensive assistant on that staff, who was a longtime coordinator with both John and his brother, Jim Harbaugh, there as well. So a lot of veteran coaches there in New York. And Jackson Dart seemingly is going to be put in a position to have some success. Talk about Callahan. Talk about the Bengals in the draft, as I mentioned. Tyler Stephenson has won his arbitration case. I don't know what the exact record here is at this point, but these players are on a heater as far as winning these hearings over their organization. The Reds were beefing over, and maybe beef, it's not the right word, but the dispute was like $300,000 or something, which to me and you, that's a ton of money. To a professional sports organization, when it comes to your starting catcher, that shouldn't be much. But ultimately, Stephenson won, and he's going to get, 6.8, something like that, $1 million in salary. Yes, he's going to get 6.8. The Reds wanted to do 6.55. Stephenson wins, and he'll be your guy from a catching perspective, certainly on opening day. And lastly, the Bearcats are in action tonight. On the hardwood. They are playing the Kansas State Wildcats, and they've got an opportunity to pick up a win. The Bearcats haven't won on the road all year, haven't won a Big 12 game on the road. Kansas State has only won one Big 12 game, so we think it's bad here in Clifton and Cincinnati, but they're struggling a lot there in Kansas State as well. The Bearcats are actually favorites in this game, which with some of the injuries they have makes you really scratch your head, but we'll preview that game a little bit to round out today's show. As always, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. On our way to 22,000 subscribers here at the channel. Like the show, like the stream, and find our podcast. Leave us a 5-star review. That really goes a long way, and we really appreciate that. All right, so let's get into some of these burning questions here, and I don't think this first one is a surprise to anybody, and that is who is going to be the 5th starting pitcher in the rotation for the Cincinnati Reds. We know what we're getting from Andrew Abbott, Nick Lodolo, Hunter Greene, and Brady Singer. I think you go into this year with one of the best, if not the best, rotation in all of baseball. And considering what you did adjustment-wise to your bullpen and adding a bat in Eugenio Suarez, lots of reason to have lots of optimism here in the Queen City as it relates to this coming season for the Cincinnati Reds. A couple of guys are competing for that 5th spot in the rotation. Rhett Lowder, he's 23 years of age, Wake Forest, top-of-the-line draft pick. We all certainly were excited when the Reds drafted him. He has pitched professionally, or I shouldn't say professionally, at the big league level for Cincinnati previously. Missed all of last year, had multiple different injuries, arm, shoulder, oblique. It was a couple of different things for Rhett Lowder. But the year prior to that, he made 6 starts, and he looked pretty good out there. I think his ERA was like sub 1.5. He was kind of lights out. And I think a lot of people view him as the favorite, in my opinion, to be the final guy in the rotation for the Cincinnati Reds. So there's the Rhett Lowder aspect. Then his Wake Forest brother as well, Chase Burns, has thrown his hat into the ring. We, of course, saw Chase Burns last year, bit of a higher pick, 2nd overall in the draft, again out of Wake Forest. And what's his role going to look like? Kind of a different pitcher. He's trying to blow you away with his fastball, high-energy guy, one of those guys where it's like he's a little bit crazy, but that's all right to have a guy like that in your rotation that's a bit of a psycho. That's who Chase Burns is. And a bit of a up and down year. Again, he's 23 years of age now, so he was probably 22 last year. And, certainly difficult coming into that spot. They asked him to do a lot. He had some, rough outings. I remember specifically they were in Boston, and, he could hardly get an out, and it was pretty brutal there. Matt McClain didn't help him out defensively in that game, I remember, but that was an ugly one. So his ERA was kind of spiked because of that, but he had some good moments, and I thought when the Reds moved him to the bullpen, kind of found a home there as far as his first year goes in the bullpen. And the conversation, of course, we had yesterday is, well, do you really want your number 2 overall pick to be in the bullpen? That's not really the best way to utilize a top-of-the-line resource. So the question becomes, if he can't beat out Rhett Lowder, do you put him in the pen to certainly help the pen, or do you keep him down in AAA where he's starting every 5th day and getting ready to eventually become a part of your starting rotation? That's going to be fascinating. And a guy who's licking his chops in this whole situation is actually the manager of the Louisville Bats, because regardless of who makes the team, who doesn't, who's in the rotation, who's not, the AAA rotation is going to be pretty loaded there as well. A couple other names are in the mix. It's by no means a 2-horse race. Brandon Williamson also in the mix. He is 27 years of age, so he's a few years older than some of these other guys. Has had some good moments in a Cincinnati Reds uniform. I think we know this. We understand this. Missed all of last year, seeming similar to Rhett Lowder. Had the injury. He's a lefty, and all these other guys are righties. So adding another lefty, if you have 3 lefties there, I think that's kind of the reason why Williamson has a shot here in this battle. Is that'd be pretty dangerous to go out there with 3 left-handed pitchers. Certainly, I think, in my opinion. But he's very much in the mix, but kind of a wild card as far as how's he going to respond to being healthy again. That's kind of a dice roll situation as well with Rhett Lowder. These guys are young. They should be able to bounce back, but you talk about it in all sports. If you have a serious injury, and if you're a pitcher, you have a serious arm injury, are you going to be the same when you come back? There's the theory out there that you'll be better sometimes if you get Tommy John, and then you're ready to go, and next thing you know, you're throwing a little bit harder, what have you. But there's also the, element of in football, like if you pop an Achilles, for example. I know it's baseball, and it's not Achilles. It's two totally different things. It's apples to oranges here. But we see some of these guys pop an Achilles and come back in football, and they look like a shell of themselves. So I think, the first couple of starts from Williamson and Rhett Lowder are going to be crucial to see, okay, where are they at? It's not going to be perfect to start. We talk about this with pitchers. They got to, ramp up. There's a ramping up process. What's that going to look like? So that'll be interesting to monitor over the course of the next few weeks. Last guy is Julian Aguiar. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. He's 24 years of age. He's kind of the wild card here. The Reds really like him a lot. I think they think he's going to be a part of the future. He was one of those guys that people were throwing around his name as a guy that potentially could get moved if they were to bring in a bat. Obviously, that didn't happen. They just signed Eugenio Suarez as a free agent. But to me, he is the longest shot to get that fifth spot. But again, it's Major League Baseball. It's spring training. It's the Cincinnati Reds. Somebody is going to, not be 100% come opening day. You hope it's none of the top four. But there's a world where multiple of these guys are in your rotation come opening day because some injuries happen and some setbacks happen. So we're going to see all these guys at some point. Long year, 162 games, right? We're going to see all of them at some point. But the question we all want to know is who's going to be that guy that, fifth game of the year, right? When it's time to, make your debut here in 2026. And again, my gut tells me it is Rhett Lowder. I'm kind of rooting for it to be Rhett Lowder. And I think then the debate becomes, what do you do with Chase Burns? Do you throw him in the pen or do you let him start in AAA? All these guys got multiple options there as well, so that's not of concern for the Cincinnati Reds here at this point. But, I think you got to be careful specifically in baseball where it's like, oh, this guy was awesome in college, so he's going to be great in the pros. A little bit different, right? I think that's why we're so excited about the two Wake Forest kids is because if you watch college baseball, and I don't, like I say, I glue to the TV and glue to the couch and watch college baseball, but I watched the College World Series. I watched the postseason, and I saw those two boys out there dogging, all right, a couple of years ago, so I think that intrigues us a lot, but I just feel like, I don't want to say Chase Burns is immature. That's kind of his style. He'll always have that chip on his shoulder kind of crazy mentality. But I just feel like Rhett can really fit in here. He seems like he's mature beyond his years. He's got great stuff. He's got a great fastball. He's been working on the off speed that I think has developed really well. Again, we'll see, having missed all of last offseason. But to me, and also kind of from a personality perspective, I think he kind of fits in perfectly to this rotation. I'm a Chase Burns fan. He's second overall pick, right? He's going to have a great career here in Cincinnati, but it's not the end of the world if he's not in the rotation to start on opening day. My gut says lean towards Rhett Lowder, but that's something we'll all be tapped into here through spring training because all these guys are going to get the baseball. What are they going to do when they have it? And ultimately, how confident is Tito that they can translate whatever success they have in spring training to the regular season come the end of March? Also of note, Chase Petty is a guy, speaking of chip on his shoulder and being fiery, he's a guy that's on the 40-man roster, and Jose Franco as well. So those are guys that we might see at some point. Not going to see him on opening day, but you might see him at some point throughout the year. And again, that's just kind of loading up the pitching there at AAA with the Louisville Bats there as well. Second burning question from C. Trent Rosecrans. Where in the world is Spencer Steer going to play? Unbelievable that he has played 6 defensive positions. I forgot he even got a look there at shortstop for a second. And I think the big thing with him, we talked about this when we were breaking down Mark Sheldon's opening day roster projection yesterday, is that versatility that he brings to the table that could potentially allow you to keep both of your left-handed outfield bats on your Major League roster. And I'm talking about J.J. Bleday and Will Benson. Why? Because Spencer Steer can play multiple spots on the field, and that's going to be fascinating to watch going forward because remember, we were breaking down those numbers. It's like, well, that's a lot of outfielders. Well, remember, Spencer Steer can go both ways as far as infield and outfield, so that certainly is an advantage there. And I think the concern, something we've all been talking about, is pretty clearly the plan, and Tito's talked about this a little bit, is to move Spencer Steer off first base. Why? Because you got to make room for Sal Stewart. Why do you got to do that? Because as Chris Welsh said here on this show, the kid can flat out hit, right? And I'm not going to say he saved the season. multiple things that kept the Reds alive down the stretch last year. But I think his call-up, a lot of us there for a second, he was called up and he was producing a little offensively. And we're sitting here going, it was too little, too late. So if you remember back to last year, there was a 10 to 20 day period where we're like, what are you waiting on? Call him up. Let's see what he can do. Reds kind of waited, eventually brought him up. Again, thought it was too little, too late, but ultimately he ends up having some success, hitting the ball over the fence a little bit, and next thing you know, he's starting a playoff game against the Dodgers at first base when he had hardly played there throughout the course of his life. So that's the concern you have, and this kind of ties into the third burning question here from C-Tram. We'll kind of just mesh them together here, but how is South Stewart and Noelvi Marte? How are they going to adjust? A stat here, Stewart played 17 innings at first base in the minors. That's nothing, right? Think about that. All these guys, if you're a top pick like Chase Burns, you get to the big leagues pretty quickly. But the days of, a guy not playing in the minor leagues and just starting in the major leagues, you don't see that very often, obviously. These guys are playing some baseball down there, and he only played 17 innings at that position. And then Noelvi Marte hadn't played a single inning in professional baseball in the minor leagues in the outfield, and you throw him out there in right field last year. So that's kind of a concern certainly that I have. I think enough people are talking about it, but defense is of paramount importance when you're a team like Cincinnati, right? You're not the Dodgers or the Yankees where you're just going to belt home runs left and right and you can make up for some bad defense. I think certainly it bit the Yankees in the rear end last year because they were a bad defensive team. But that's kind of been the identity of the Reds. Like, I remember even when they were bad a couple of years ago, it's like, well, they always gloved it pretty well. And last year they got in the playoffs in spite, I think, of their defense. It wasn't like bottom of the league, like terrible, unwatchable, but it wasn't nearly as buttoned up as it needed to be. And I think that's why a lot of us have concern there. It's like, well, Tito alluded to this a couple of days ago, basically saying, yeah, I'm going to be writing Spencer Steer's name in the lineup more times than not. So Spence is going to be playing, but if he's out there in left field, that's a below average major league left fielder. Right, and then you're putting a kid at first base who, again, Freddie Benavides was on the show. He was talking about the work they've been putting in this offseason. Hopefully that looks good in spring training, but you don't want him to be a liability down there at first. And then Noelvi, it worked out for you in right last year, but, at some point will the numbers kind of align with the expectation of, oh, this guy hasn't played here. Like at some point he's going to make some mistakes that are going to hurt you as a team. We'll see. But I think those questions are fascinating, and it'll be interesting because we were talking about Chase Burns not wanting to have a number 2 overall pick in your bullpen, and Tito's kind of alluded to this with South Stewart as well. Well, you don't want a 22-year-old DH, right? You want to put him out there in the field and see what he can do. You're not putting him at third base. You got a known commodity down there and keep Brian Hayes. You're not putting him at second because part of the reason Matt McClain, they're giving him another chance here is because he can defend just about his stick and how he does at the plate, but you're not putting him there, right? So you look around, it's like you're not putting him in the outfield, and you don't want to DH him, so really first base is the only logical place you can put him. And then it's like, sorry, Spence, back out to the outfield there, and he'll be competing with some lefties, obviously, and Benson and Blade. I don't want Spencer Steer to be a platoon guy at all, obviously. Like I think Spencer Steer is an everyday player, so it'll be fascinating to see, how they work around there. And look, Ellie played in every game last year, as we all know. He needs a couple of days off this year, and I think when they do that, they'll probably put McClain at short, which I think McClain could. That's a whole different conversation. But if they ever moved Ellie to the outfield, which a lot of us have been saying to try it out at least or see how it looks, I think McClain could play a really good shortstop in the pros, professionally in the big leagues. But that's a conversation for a different day. But the few days that they give Ellie a day off, again, they need to give him a couple. I think you'll see McClain bounce to short and then probably Spencer Steer go to second. Does Spencer go to first and then South Stewart at second? I don't know. That's another burning question I have is what does the backup to Matt McClain look like? And I don't want to be in a spot where Matt McClain's batting .074 and you're rolling him out there each and every day, right? Just because he can, field his position pretty well. Like if it's not going well for a few months here, you may have to be like, okay, like we're going to head in a different direction here. And kind of like what we saw last year where it was kind of a soft benching and then next thing you know, he's back in the lineup and playing. Tito doesn't want to be in that spot. None of us do. We want Matt McClain to do what he did as a rookie and have a great year. But I'm curious as to what the plan is behind him. One, if he gets hurt, and two, if he just simply doesn't produce. But those are some burning questions that C. Trent had I think we all share the same thought process as well. We're all kind of on the edge of our seat, like who's that fifth starter in the rotation going to be, right? What exactly are you going to do with Steer? What if he's out and left and it ain't working defensively and South Stewart's not working at first defensively and Noelvi's making mistakes in right? How do you adjust there if you're Tito? Because where you're at as a team, if you're losing games because of your defense, you need to make a change. You can't just keep doing that, right? You don't have enough talent in order to do that. You don't have enough talent in order to overcome that, I should say. So that'll be fascinating to watch over the course of the next few weeks. All right, Brian Callahan. For a while there, for a second there, it was looking like he might come back to the Bengals. There was no rumblings of this, but it was just using logic. Senior offensive assistant Brian Callahan, and he's up there in the booth with pitch and helping game plan. I kind of felt like we were trending in that direction a little bit. But then again, when he was fired from the Tennessee Titans, I was checking my phone and wondering where the heck the notification was that, he was coming back to Cincinnati in some advisor role, and ultimately that never happened. Threw his hat in the ring for multiple OC jobs, the Tampa job, which funnily enough Pitcher was going after as well, the New York job, which ended up going to Matt Nagy. And as these jobs began to fill up, Brian Callahan didn't have one. And that changes here today as the Giants are hiring him as their new quarterback coach and pass game coordinator. So my biggest takeaway is Jackson Dart's in a good spot, number one. And two, I'm not just going to say that I'm disappointed that he's not back here in Cincinnati. Inevitably, Dan Pitcher is going to leave at some point. Clearly, it doesn't look like that's now. He'll be back for this year, but if the Bengals have success, dare I say, make the playoffs, Pitcher probably going to be gone, whether it be offensive coordinator, play calling duties elsewhere, or even a head coach. Perhaps then does Callahan come as the OC non-play caller, where he was the quarterback coach for New York. That's kind of a conversation for down the road. But look, there are some guys that are born to be head coaches, and there are some guys that are meant to be assistants or even coordinators, and that's okay. We talk about some of these guys getting a second chance to be a head coach. Bob Saleh, right, getting a second chance to be a head coach. I think we all know Mike McDaniel will get another chance to be a head coach. Doesn't feel like that's going to happen for Brian Callahan. I think he understood that he kind of had to strike while the iron was hot, right? They were having success with Burrow, and he got thrown a head coaching opportunity, and they had a top draft pick, obviously, or ended up getting one in Cam Ward. So, there was intrigue there. But, the ownership situation there, how things ended with Vrabel, like that was by no means a great job. And it was probably one of those situations where it's like, well, you got to offer the job, and no one else is offering a job, so I might never get another job again. So got to strike while the iron's hot, take an opportunity, take a chance. He did. It didn't work out. I don't think it's his fault necessarily, but not enough good things happened there in Tennessee for him to get another opportunity as a head coach in the National Football League. So from Jackson Dart's perspective, he had something in place with Brian Daboll, right? Daboll rolled the dice with him. They traded up. Joe Shane did. And again, that firing to me, when it happened, like you want to fire Daboll after the year, fine. But a guy that you drafted in the first round as your franchise quarterback that you didn't start in week one, by the way. Remember, Russell Wilson was starting to begin the year, and then you throw him out there. He has some success, and then you fire the guy that wanted him and was kind of providing him tutelage throughout this process. To me, it was very head-scratching. I didn't understand it at all. And then I think that's why you saw, I don't want to say Jackson Dart went belly up. He had obviously some injury issues, which he's got to get cleaned up. A lot of it's self-inflicted, by the way. But I don't think he really had much of a chance as a rookie in the NFL quarterback, and you lose your coach. Like that's pretty tough to have a good end of the year there. So the Giants, intentionally or not, I don't know, kind of tanked. They had a top 5 pick. I think they were hoping to have better than that. But you look at this staff now, and if you're Jackson Dart, you got to be so excited about what you have in front of you. John Harbaugh is now your head coach. And if you're the Harbaughs, John or Jim, they are very reliant on coordinators, and that's okay, right? So if you're a CEO head coach, that's kind of the operation there. And luckily for Jackson Dart and the Giants, I think they checked off a lot of those boxes. Now, Matt Nagy gets kind of a bad rap for how things went in Chicago, but let's understand that he made the playoffs with Mitchell Trubisky, which is, saying something. He had some awful losses, certainly, and some clock management issues, but he won enough with Mitchell Trubisky and then has been a part of Andy Reid and Mahomes and has won there with them. So, I've got belief that he can help out as kind of, a mentor for Jackson Dart. And then you add Brian Callahan into that room. And by the way, Greg Roman's on the staff as a senior offensive assistant. So lots of things going Jackson Dart's way here. And we'll do this later in the week, maybe Monday next week, where we'll take 5 teams that I think are on the up and up and could potentially be playoff teams that weren't playoff teams. And then we'll take another 5 teams who had good years but might be in a difficult spot for 2027. And I'll just spoil one right now. I am buying stock on the New York Football Giants with that operation that they have in place. And the main reason being, I've got some question marks with Dart. I was higher on him than some other people were. But to me, it's all John Harbaugh. And if you think John Harbaugh is going to go into New York and win 5 or 6 games, you're crazy, because that ain't going to happen. But Brian Callahan not going to be back in Cincinnati. Don't think it's the end of the world. Again, I kind of thought he would have already been back by now, but he's the QB coach with the Giants. Let's stick to the NFL and talk a little NFL draft here on today's show. Again, if you're just joining us, I mentioned this earlier. I did my first 7-round mock draft for the Bengals. That will go out at 11 o'clock tomorrow, and then the specific video will go out later in the afternoon as well. PFF gave me a B+. Didn't feel great about it, but I felt okay for the first one. We're going to do like 5 or 6. Got a B+. Had some issues there at the top. A lot of good players were going off the board before I would have liked. Didn't have the pick of the litter at number 10, so some concern there. I think I did a nice job at the back end of the draft. I think I found some value in the 6th round specifically, and understand that the Bengals currently don't have a 5th-round pick. They lost it in the Flacco trade. They got an additional 6 from Cleveland, so 2 6, no 5th, and hopefully eventually 2/3 if they can execute a tag and trade with Trey Hendrickson. But Paul Dehner Jr., friend of the show, does a fantastic job covering the Bengals for The Athletic. He did his first mock draft. He calls it 0.5, and I get it because free agency hasn't happened. And, the needs that Cincinnati has today could very well be different on draft night, depending on how they address certain needs throughout this process and free agency over the course of the next few weeks and months. And he just did the first 4 picks. He didn't do any of the 6th or 7th round guys. And I understand that, and I can respect that certainly as well. But let's kind of just dive into what he had to say, and I'll give my thoughts on that as well. At number 1, by the way, he has like a criteria based on Brugler's top 100 of guys that are eligible to take. Right? Like, he's not going to sit there and go, okay, I would take Arvell Reese at number 10. Well, yeah, no kidding. I think everybody in the league would as well, but he's not going to be available. So he tries to make it as realistic as possible. At number 10, he has Ruben Bain, and I do think this is realistic. So much with the draft and scouting is trait-based, measurable-based, and I don't love it. You don't have to love it, but that's just the way it is, right? Perfect example right now is Will Campbell in New England. For what it's worth, I don't think you can say he's a bust. He had his worst game in the Super Bowl, so that's kind of a tough scene there. A lot of negative feedback going his way. But the whole thing about Will Campbell was the tackle class last year wasn't really that deep. New England obviously needed one badly, and everyone was like, his arms are short. He's got short arms. But, there was character in the player that kind of outweighed that. He's a high-character guy, great teammate, works his butt off. All the intangibles, check. He's tough, right? He's not soft by any means. But, he had the short arms, and there were teams around the league that probably laughed when New England took him at number 4 overall. Not because he's a bad guy, not because even he's a bad player, but if you take someone at a premium pick, a top 5 pick, there can't be a massive measurable red flag like that. And having short arms as an offensive lineman is not ideal. And you could argue that it really hurt New England. Again, I'm not fully out on him. The reason why he's getting so much negative feedback is because it was in the playoffs, in the Super Bowl, and everybody was watching him, and clearly there was pressure from that side of the line. I get it. They also had a rookie at left guard, by the way, who wasn't good either. But the reason I say all that is because Ruben Bain, the production is there, right? If you watched college football playoff, that was awesome, his performance. And he did it all year, ACC Defensive Player of the Year. But as far as edge rushers in the NFL go, he's got a little bit of a shorter wingspan, arm-wise, and he's got a bit of a smaller build, right? And that could allow him to drop a little bit in the draft. I think David Bailey's the better player, but David Bailey also has the better measurables and the better traits. So you might roll your eyes and say, oh, yeah, no kidding, you take Ruben Bain. Well, these teams are going to be a little bit hesitant to take him with some of that size, length, wingspan concerns that he brings to the table. Now, Daner points this out in his piece. If he's available there, Zach Taylor, there's going to be a camera shot on all of them. They're going to be losing their mind, right? They're going to be hugging each other. It's going to be crazy, right? If Ruben Bain's available, and of course, or Caleb Downs. But I do think there's a chance he does fall, and I think if he's there, again, it's somehow both Ruben Bain and Caleb Downs are there. Not going to happen. I would take Downs, but if Bain's there, you take him, and you feel really fortunate because he was the player that we all wanted last year. High production. Not just traits, right? Is he going to get bottled up a little bit by an elite tackle in this league? Sure. But he's going to get home and win enough, too, and bring some production to your defense. And he's tough. He's physical. He's played in big games. And he's got, I hate to be cliche here, but he's got that dog in him, right? And he does. And I think we'd all love Ruben Bain as a part of the Bengals. Other guys that he considered, and this is where you go, whoa, a little bit. Keldrick Falk, that's the guy that I have two red flag guys, two guys that I'm out on. I guess you could say more. I'm out on Keldrick Falk of Auburn, edge rusher, Peter Woods, and a tackle, or an offensive player, I should say. And I think, kind of going on a side tangent here, my gut is starting to tell me that maybe both of these tackles, Maui Noah from Miami and Fano from Utah, maybe both are available, and the Bengals are going to be like, oh, there's our tackle of the future. These guys are right tackles, though, by the way, not left tackles. So I'm a little bit concerned there. But those guys are off limits. Offensive player, off limits. Keldrick Falk, Peter Woods, off limits. That's where I'm at right now as we stand here on February 11th. Why am I out on Keldrick Falk? The same reason I was out on Shamar Stewart. Oh, he's fast. He's physical. He's got this great upside. He didn't do anything at Auburn. All right, I got no interest in bringing in another Shamar Stewart and doing it 7 picks earlier at 10 as opposed to 17. I'm out on him. He also mentions Caden Proctor, who this time last year, I would have looked at you and said, Caden Proctor's a top 10 pick, maybe even top 5 pick. And he had a fine year at Alabama, and I still think he's a first-round pick. But if you take Caden Proctor above the two guys from the two other linemen, Maui Noah and Fano, now Caden Proctor's the left tackle, which, again, there's very, different opinions on what to do with Amarius Mims. He's great. You just leave him at right, or when OBJ leaves, you try him at left. I don't know. But Caden Proctor can play left tackle. You don't take him at number 10, right? Again, I watched basically every snap of Caden Proctor's career. I mean, you don't want to take him at number 10, right? Especially with all the crap you got going on defense. And then another guy's Jermod McCoy, the corner out of Tennessee. He's a great player, but guess what? He didn't play all last year because he blew up his knee, right? Talking about a red flag guy. Great player, and it would not surprise me at all if he's great in the National Football League. But at number 10, you got to rebuild your defense. You got to hit this pick. You're going to take a guy that didn't play last year because he had a blown-out knee. It seems like a pretty stupid idea, in my opinion. So those are other names that were thrown around that are going to be available. And, again, there's a world where Bain's not available, and Sonny Styles isn't available, and Downs isn't available, and Bailey's not available, and Reese isn't available. And you're sitting there going, do we take a corner? Do we reach on an interior guy that should be like the 20th pick and we take him at 10? I don't know. Going to be fascinating to see. And another side tangent really quickly. People were making fun of me, including Reed Mouse, when I got on here after Kansas City secured that pick one in front of Cincinnati. And I came here and said, you know what, this might cost us. And I was freaking out a little bit about it. I'm going to bring it up again now, right? It wouldn't surprise me if all those guys were off the board. You had your one guy that you still were holding on to. The Bengals, of course, wouldn't trade up to do it, and boom, Kansas City takes him, and you're sitting there going, oh, boy, at number 10 overall. And I'm not a glass half-empty guy, but just pointing that out. All right, second round. This is where it gets a little bit interesting because the Bengals have to address the interior of their defensive line. We know this. We've been saying this forever. Free agency-wise, like John Franklin Myers is the top one in this class, and you're going to have to grossly overpay in order to get him from Denver. And there isn't a guy that you can take in the first round. Banks from Florida is a first-rounder, but not in the top 10, right? So I think second round feels like, okay, this is your opportunity to get an interior defensive lineman if you're able to get an edge in the first round. Right? Now, if you don't get the edge in the first round and you get Caleb Downs or a corner, maybe you go edge in round 2. But the guy that Daner has them picking is Christian Miller, which I like this pick a lot. Defensive players from Georgia, pretty safe pick for the most part, as long as they're not driving a car too fast, which you can't bank on that happening. I mean, that to me is crazy, these Georgia players that don't know how to drive. However, when it comes to playing football, and, for the most part, not like they speed, and that's not good, but for the most part, it's, they're not killing people, all right? But that obviously is a bit of a concern. But Christian Miller, defensive player, Kirby Smart, interior guy, tough, physical, SEC. That feels like a safe pick, and he's got some run-stopping ability and some ability to apply some pressure on the quarterback. Bengals haven't seen a guy that can do both since Geno Atkins, and that's been quite some time. And by the way, Georgia Bulldog there as well, so maybe you get one of those guys in there, right? Get these Michigan guys out, right, and put in a dude from the SEC, a Georgia guy, or, K-Mac from Ohio State falls, get him, just quit getting these soft Michigan guys like Chris Jenkins, who doesn't know what the heck he's doing out there. I'm so sick of that, to be honest with you. But Christian Miller in the second round, 41 overall. I like that. Some other names that he threw around. T.J. Parker. Now, he's from Clemson too, but I'm open to T.J. Parker in the second round. There's going to be defensive linemen at the edge and the interior there, and they're all about the same, or not one's going to be like, oh, this guy's a future Hall of Famer, but they're all like, all right, we can play with these guys, and it's going to come down to Cincinnati picking the right one, right? Do you have confidence in them doing that? Absolutely not. See if that changes this year. But T.J. Parker in the second round, the edge from Clemson, I'm okay with that in the second round. Him in the first round, no. Peter Woods in the first round, no. If Peter Woods falls to 41, heck yeah, take him. Just not in the top 10. Zion Young, another guy. I like him. I've mocked him, not the one that's going out tomorrow, but just when I'm doing it for fun. I have mocked him to Cincinnati before. He's big, Mizzou, edge. I'm worried he's a little too stiff, but, you took Shamar, and he was some great athlete, and he can't really do anything. So I don't know if that'd be the end of the world, but he's a big dude. He's had some success. Feels like a lock to be chosen in the second round. But I am a little bit worried about his lack of athleticism. But, once you get outside the top 10, it's not going to be like, oh, this guy's a perfect player. That's why these guys get paid millions of dollars to scout. Or the scouts don't get paid millions of dollars, but Duke Tobin's getting paid millions of dollars to figure this out, right? Who else? The other one, D'Angelo Pons. To me, if you watched Indiana at all, and it wasn't just in the playoff, D'Angelo Pons is awesome. That guy's insane. And he's going to fall just because he's small. Sorry to rhyme there, but I think he's like 5'10", and probably 170 pounds, soaking wet. Guy can play, and the Bengals haven't shied away from that player in the past, a la Mike Hilton, right? D'Angelo Pons in the slot with Dax and DJ, sign me up. Second round, is that a little early because of the size? I don't know, maybe. But the guy can play, and he's going to be able to play well in the NFL, but he's also going to get bodied from time to time because he's just a smaller dude, and that's just kind of how it is. Two more. Caleb Tieran, offensive tackle out of Northwestern. This, to me, is interesting. In the mock that I did that's going out tomorrow, I didn't get a tackle, which I don't love. I think drafting a tackle in the first 3 rounds is a good idea. I couldn't find somebody that had good value, but I do like this. You hear that this kid apparently is some diamond in the rough guy, and obviously played at Northwestern, so it's like nobody's watching Northwestern. We have no clue. But I am very much open to them taking a tackle in the 3rd round. Not the 1st round, not the 2nd round, but you want to take a tackle in the 3rd round. That's something I am open to, right? I'm willing to have that conversation. And ultimately, we'll see if the Cincinnati Bengals do that or not. But apparently this kid from Northwestern can play a little bit. Other guys that were on the board, Keontae Scott. Again, if you watch the college football playoff, good player, safety at Miami. I kind of like the draft route at safety as opposed to the free agent route, but the Bengals just don't like to address that position at all. So I don't know exactly what they're going to do there. Keontae Scott in the 3rd round is a guy that I would like. And then Danny Dennis Sutton out of Penn State. Expected him kind of going into the college football season to be a much higher pick, but everybody kind of fell apart at Penn State, obviously. So interested to know where he would go, but I also kind of would rather have an edge off the board by the time you're picking in the 3rd round. And I know. So draft the player, not the position. Time to draft the position here for the Bengals. defensive line, safety, maybe a corner, certainly a linebacker. Yeah, basically every position on the defense draft. So we'll see. But I'm not opposed to a tackle in the third round. Lastly, Chandler Rivers, cornerback out of Duke in the fourth round. Yeah, you need depth in that room. We've said it a million times on this show. Dax and DJ, yeah, you got something there, but there's one of them's going to get hurt, maybe both of them, right? The fact that they got through the whole year healthy last year, pretty crazy. And you need some depth beyond that. And I think a lot of us like Fig Newton and his effort and his character, but is he a guy that you can lean on if one of those guys goes down? I don't know. I really don't. And beyond him, like what? We like DJ Ivy on third down, but can he play first and second down at corner? No, I don't think he can. So I think that's kind of an underlying need for Cincinnati, and that's why I am open to the possibility at number 10. If Bailey's gone, Caleb Downs is gone, Ruben Bain is gone, Sonny Styles is gone. Like, I'll take Delane at 10 out of LSU. I would take him in front of McCoy because drafting a guy, as I already said, that didn't play last year because he blew out his knee seems like a pretty stupid decision. But Mansour Delane out of LSU, he can play. And just be open to the idea of potentially taking a corner in round 1. Bengals did that. Well, I guess Dax was, a safety there at that point. So, and DJ was a second rounder. But you could make the argument that they don't know what they're doing with the DBs. But those guys morphed into really good players for him this past year. So we'll see. But be open to the idea of a corner at 1. Daner has them going corner in the fourth round at a Duke, Chandler Rivers. All right, let's talk Tyler Stephenson here. Got about 20 minutes left on the show. Appreciate everyone as always. Make sure you hit that like button if you haven't done so already, and subscribe. Find the podcast, leave us a 5-star review. Tyler Stephenson, he won his arbitration case. The fact that they went to arbitration to me is crazy. Let me just pull this up real quickly once again. The number that Tyler Stephenson wanted was 6.8, and the number the Reds wanted was 6.55. You're a professional team, and he's your starting catcher. You're going to beef over $250,000? I don't get it, right? Maybe there's something that I'm missing here. Again, $250,000 to you and me is a ton. We would love to have $250,000. If you're a professional sports team and you're dealing with your starting catcher, again, not some guy in your worst arm in the bullpen. No, like your starting catcher. I don't understand that. But these players are on a heater. I don't know what the record is right now, but I know like Scooble obviously won his, and Ashcraft recently won his with the Reds. So for whatever reason, these players have been correct in the eyes of the courts, and Tyler Stephenson's the latest one. Now, unfortunate news, he was talking to Charlie Goldsmith, who's out in Arizona right now for spring training, and was like, yeah, since last year, the talks about a potential extension, there haven't been any talks. Not great. I have the mindset that the Reds should extend Tyler Stephenson. And again, you have to look through it, use the lens of what he has done as a player, not the lens of what the expectations were when you picked him and when he was making his debut. Because I think those expectations were sky high, and has he lived up to them? No. But is he a really good player in professional baseball? Is he an everyday catcher? Yes. Right? Is he a good offensive player? Yes. Was your offense way better when he was healthy than when it was not? Yes. So he has the ability to hit the ball over the fence from time to time. Extra base hits are a thing with him as well. He'll drive in some runs. So to me, I would extend him. But, the fact that they're not even talking about it kind of feels like the writing's on the wall a little bit. Now, hopefully he balls out first couple months of the season. Maybe they get something done. But you would hate for him, a player of his stature, and I don't want to sit here and act like he's Joe Mauer, but there's value with Tyler Stephenson. And you might be in a position where you move him at the deadline just so you get something for him and he doesn't walk in free agency. Now, he's got allegiances to the Reds. He loves the Reds. And I think if you asked him if he wanted to be a Red forever, he would say yes. But the prospect of being a free agent as a catcher that can hit, somebody's going to throw him some serious cash. And he probably would be excited to be a free agent, right, at the end of this year. So I would look at extending him. But if he's not going to be a part of your team next year, I think you got to explore moving him at the deadline, regardless of where you're at from a contention standpoint. And we've seen Milwaukee do this as well. The Brewers are just so ridiculous. They traded away great players again this offseason. They'll win the division no problem again. Don't know how, but they're able to do it. And we've seen them have a great year and then say, yep, we'll just move this guy at the deadline, right, and then continue to win. So that is crazy. And also a note on the Brewers as well. I think a lot of us were scratching our head when it's like, what in the world? Why would Craig Counsell leave? Like, they won all these games. I think you're starting to see why. Because he was so sick of not being aggressive and just this whole draft and develop, and then when it's time to pay guys, not pay them. It works as far as winning a ton of games and winning the division, but getting to the World Series and winning it, we haven't obviously seen that for the Milwaukee Brewers. So I think it's a mistake. Personally, I would like Stephenson to be around. I think he's made of all the right things. And, Chris Welsh was saying, just because you're a good guy, that doesn't mean you can win pennants, right? And then that is absolutely true. I think a lot of us were frustrated when India left just because we all were like, well, he's the heartbeat of the team. Say the Reds kind of mopped the floor with that trade, did they not? Getting Brady Singer in here, so that was great execution from the front office. You don't just want to, bring a guy back as, oh, he's a team player and he's a good leader and everybody likes him and the fans like him. That's not a reason why you want to have him on the team. But if I put all that aside and I just evaluate him as a baseball player, yeah, he gets dinged up a little bit. He's a catcher. It happens. But as far as a hitting catcher in this league, he does a really nice job. And as time goes on, you're seeing these catchers start to struggle more and more and more at the dish. And is he Cal Raleigh? Obviously not. But he can hit. And I think also in the back of the Reds' mind, they're thinking about Alfredo Duno. Who you talk to anybody around the Reds or that covers the Reds, they're like, this guy is he's just an unreal, is what people are saying, out of Alfredo Duno. But it's hard for me to imagine he'll be on the big league club this year, right? And I think even 27 could be, I don't want to say a stretch, but like definitely not a foregone conclusion. So I think having Stephenson in place would be nice, but, if he goes and Duno's up and ready to go and he's balling, obviously we're not saying anything about Tyler Stephenson here at this point. But he settles his arbitration, and he ultimately going to be the guy on opening day, and he's going to split time with Trevino. That's another thing, too. Like, you paid Trevino 3 years, $15 million last year before he even played an inning with Cincinnati, and I think it was a good move. Could he hit the ball towards the end of the year? No. But, helps manage the staff, had a really good month to start the year offensively. So we'll see what he can do this year. But it's like you've shown you've been willing to pay in the past. Stevenson's going to deserve a much bigger contract than that. But I think you got a solid backstop in place that you can win with. And I would keep him. But, again, no talks here at this point coming from Charlie Goldsmith. So kind of feels like the writing's on the wall a little bit for him. But then again, it felt like it was on the wall with T. Higgins, and then he balled out, and then Joe Burrow was banging the table, and he's here for the long term. So anything can happen. We'll ultimately just have to wait and see. Bearcats back in action tonight. They won their last game, right? Played really well, beat UCF. UCF's not a bottom feeder in the Big 12. UCF obviously beat Cincinnati earlier in the season. And, Cincinnati got their lick back, so to speak, and hung 90 points, which that to me was the biggest takeaway. It's like, you're capable of scoring 90 points? I thought you could only score 50. But they scored 90-plus points in the game, played well, got some contributions from multiple different guys, and we'll see if they can build off it. I'm not going to use the phrase must win because I think he could win out. He being Wes Miller, is that going to make much of a difference? Probably not. But if you can win this game, I think that would say a lot about you perhaps being able to string together some wins, finishing on a high note, maybe win a couple of games in the Big 12 tournament, perhaps. But this is a Kansas State team that is not good. Jerome Tang has been doing this for a couple of years now, went on that great run a couple of years ago in March, hasn't really done anything since. He's got a couple of really good guards that are going to give Cincinnati some trouble in this game. Obviously, we all know about Nate Johnson, right, local guy, Lakota East High School, and also their best player is P.J. Haggerty, and he averages 20-plus points a game. He's a guard. He's bounced around. Where was he at? He was at like Tulsa for a second. I think Memphis as well. I think he's a 4-year for school kind of guy, which is just ridiculous. But he can play. How you slow him down is going to be huge for UC. But they're clearly shorthanded, and Wes loves making the excuse, letting everybody know they're shorthanded. Like, we get it, Wes. But they're not at full health. Abayev's going to be out again tonight, which, that experience hasn't gone the way a lot of us were hoping. Celestine shot it great against UCF. He's going to have to shoot it great again. Mustafa Cham is back on the injury report, and that is huge, right? Clearly he's not 100%. I think it's a knee that he's dealing with. I think last I looked, he was like questionable for the game, or however they phrase it in college basketball. But if they don't have him, they're in deep trouble because they don't really like McKinley's banged up too. Like you're going to get more than 15-ish minutes from him. He plays really hard and he's done a nice job, but he's not 100%. A lot clearly falling on the shoulders of Baba Miller in this game. Crease is back, but looks like a shell of himself. So we'll see how, and he hasn't been able to practice really much either. So they are very much shorthanded, and they're going to need Baba to play well, and they're going to need him to stay out of foul trouble. But this would be a big win to be able to go on the road, pick up your first road win of the year, improve your record a little bit more in the Big 12. When you look at the conference, like it feels like they're in last place just because of what the expectation level was and the hope that we had and just kind of the embarrassing things that Wes has done and said. But they're more towards the middle of the pack of this conference. And if they can beat a team like Kansas State and beat some of these games where they're the favorite in, which isn't going to be a ton of them, but, you could make a little bit of something out of this season, I would say. What's unfortunate is, like, you lost to Arizona State, which that should be a team that you should have beat. You had them at home, I think, too. So that's just, a game that you can't lose. You lost that. And if you can go on the road, beat a team like that with some really good guards, obviously your guards are going to have to defend when it comes to Jizzle James and Day Thomas, of course, as well. But Nate Johnson and Haggerty, those guys can play, and it's going to be an immense challenge for UC tonight. But Baba got to stay out of foul trouble. If he can do that, they should be in a spot where they can compete. But with the issues they have health-wise with their size, their guards are going to have to play really, really well. And if there's one thing that Kansas State does well, it's their guard play, right? So thought it was interesting that Cincinnati was favored. I think it's about 2.5 at this point. Kind of felt like it should be the other way, like plus 2.5 for Cincinnati, but they are favored in this game, and ultimately we'll see how that plays out and if they're able to pick up a victory and then kind of go from there. But this is a game you should win, right? I get you're shorthanded. I get you're on the road. You're the better team in this spot. You should be able to go in there banged up, pick up a win, and try to establish a little momentum for yourself. Think about that. They haven't gone on the road and won. It's February 11th. That's absurd. All right, so hopefully that can get cleaned up tonight, and hopefully UC can establish a little bit of momentum here and give the fans a little bit something to cheer for when they come back. All right, about 10 minutes left here on the show, and there is something that I want to hit because James Rapine brought this up, and I think it's a great point, and I think it's something that Cincinnati should obviously explore. We've talked about, these interior defensive linemen. They don't grow on trees, right? Similar to left tackles, and they certainly don't grow on trees when it comes to stopping the run and providing pressure on the quarterback. Again, Geno Atkins isn't walking through that door. Free agent-wise, right now, it's like John Franklin Myers and then a bunch of guys that you're kind of rolling the dice on, right? Some TJ Slaytons of the world and Sheldon Rankins of the world, guys like that. My thing is, don't care, bring in new guys. I've seen enough with the guys that you have in place. But there could be some guys that become available via a cut, and nobody more obvious than Kenny Clark of the Dallas Cowboys. You might be thinking, that sounds familiar. I know who Kenny Clark is. That's the guy that was involved in the Micah Parsons deal that came over from Green Bay. And, people look at that, and obviously Micah and the first-round picks is a story there. But Dallas got a really good player in Kenny Clark, and I think he's 30 exactly. Don't know. Yeah, he is 30 years of age exactly. But he's got a huge cap hit, $21.5 million for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, a couple of reasons why that's important. Who did they trade for at the trade deadline? Quinnen Williams. He's going to be out there for every snap so long as he's healthy, right? One of the best defensive tackles in all of football. Who did they pay last year? Osa Odigizua, right? So you got two dudes that you're paying a lot of money, right? And then another guy in Kenny Clark with a massive cap hit. Hard to imagine that Dallas is going to keep all three, and they're not getting rid of Quinnen, and they're not getting rid of Osa. Another thing about the Dallas Cowboys is they are way over the salary cap right now. That is not a secret. Everybody in the league knows that and understands that. And guess what? There's been reports that they're tagging George Pickens. That number goes up even more. It doubles. They're going to be like $60 million over the salary cap. So cutting a guy in Kenny Clark makes a lot of sense from Dallas. Now, if he's available, it's not like the Bengals cutting Oren Burks, right? There's going to be a big market for Kenny Clark. Should you be aggressive in that pursuit of Kenny Clark. Yes, I understand he's older. That's fine, right? You can work out, what the deal will look like ultimately, and there's the notion that should you try to orchestrate a trade, maybe give him a day 3 pick just so you don't have to outbid other people? Maybe, but Kenny Clark, that clears up a lot of issues for you along the interior, right? From a run-stopping perspective and just the ability to get some sense of a rush on the quarterback. And I think this is something Cincinnati really should consider. And as time goes on, to me, it's becoming very, very obvious that Kenny Clark is not going to be a member of the Dallas Cowboys, especially after that report that they plan on tagging George Pickens, which if you're trading him, fine. But we had this discussion already on the show where I just don't understand why you would opt to pay George Pickens big-time money when you're already paying Dak a fortune, $60 million, which is just hilarious, and CeeDee Lamb, who deserves his money. But the Bengals philosophy, again, I've said this, I think it works, or I think it will work eventually with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. But if you don't have Joe Burrow or Jamar Chase, and Dak and CeeDee are great players, they're not Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, it's not going to work. Right, and we all saw how bad the Dallas defense was last year. Wasn't as bad as Cincinnati, certainly in the beginning stages of the year. But they got to give a lot of attention to defense. They're going to have to draft and develop well there. And I just don't think they have the room to keep Clark along with Osa, who they're already paying, and Quentin Williams, who, of course, they acquired in a trade. Feels like he's going to be available. Will Cincinnati be aggressive to try to bring him in? Probably not. They're going to say, oh, he already turned 30? Oh, get out of here. It's like Leonardo DiCaprio and his girlfriend turns 25. I'm sorry, man, this isn't going to work anymore. It's kind of how the Bengals are when they have a non-offensive lineman turn 30 years of age. But I think he will become available, and I think it would be a great decision for Cincinnati ultimately to go after him at this point. The Red Hawks, of course, don't have a midweek game this week. They're back in action on Friday. That is going to be exciting. ESPN, 9 o'clock, Oxford, Ohio, Millett Hall. We had Peter Suter on the show last week. Check that out. It's on YouTube if you haven't checked it out already. The Red Hawks, the lone undefeated team. How about it? What an unbelievable year they've had to this point. Can't really afford to stub their toe. I think they can get away with one loss, but more than a couple of toe stubbages, this thing kind of comes crashing down. But Travis Steele's got some swagger. We had him on our show, and they were like 4-0. But he is back. He's doing the rounds. He's on every college basketball show, podcast. Paulie's had him on at the rundown certainly as well, and he's just kind of making the rounds and certainly living in the moment. And it's going to be fascinating to me what he does going forward, because he's getting paid. I think we talked about this. It's like $300,000, and don't quote me on that. That could be wrong, but it's clearly less than $1 million, right? And there's going to be openings like there always is, and he's going to be a top name, especially if he gets into the tournament and especially if he wins a game. Can Miami, up his salary to get him to stay? Will he choose to stay? There's always that option. Right, where a guy's like, I like it here in this area. I like what we're building. I like how the community rallied around. But at the end of the day, money does talk, a la Kyle Schwarber, right? So I think the idea of coming here to play for the Reds was great, but then the Phillies said, well, we can give you more money. And he was like, I'll probably stay here for the Phillies. But it'll be fascinating to see how that transpires with Travis Steele. But regardless, they've got this year. They've got the perfect record. For whatever reason, the AP poll won't bump them up a little bit into maybe the teens. We'll see if ultimately that comes true or not. But when you talk about undefeated teams in college basketball, there's only one, and it's the Miami Redhawks right here in Oxford, Ohio, which is pretty awesome to talk about. So we'll talk about hopefully a win next week after the Friday night game against OU. So certainly looking forward to that. The Olympics, of course, are on. Lindsey Vonn, we talked about her. What a heartbreaking story that is. Credit to her. She goes out there and races with a torn ACL, which you hear the news and you're like, oh, wow, what a savage. This is unbelievable. But then you're like, how is this going to work? And then it didn't work because she was going down the hill and then immediately wrecked. So credit to her for gutting it out. That was a big reason. We were kind of tapping into the Olympics here, was to kind of see her return, 40, 41 years of age, whatever it is. Most legendary skier of all time. I think it's safe to say that. But certainly wishing her the best and her recovery, but she gave it a go, and you got to absolutely respect that. I've been watching the Olympics a little bit, definitely more of a Summer Olympic guy myself, but some of this stuff is crazy. I mean, the guy that's like going up the hill on the skis, and he's like going faster than I could ever run. It's like, you're going uphill and you're skiing. I don't know if you've ever thrown on a pair of skis, but the worst thing to do is if you got to go up a hill or even like up just a step in your skis, and this guy's running full speed up the hill, and then he's pulling out a gun and shooting it. I'm like, what in the world is going on? But some crazy stuff in the Olympics, and I've been watching that a little bit. Sometimes a little background noise, just kind of throw it on or whatever, see what's going on. But yeah, it's cool. See the people out there representing the USA. Obviously, we love to see that. But that'll do it for this edition of the show. Appreciate everyone, as always, for tuning in. We will be back tomorrow, but I technically won't be live. You won't know the difference. But it will be our 7-round mock draft. Looking forward to you guys seeing that, providing some feedback there on that, giving me your thoughts. Mock draft 1.0. Friday, we're going to have a conversation with Casey McAllister. He makes his return to the airwaves here at Chatterbox Sports, and I'm going to pick his brain on all the Bengals offseason topics. I know you guys have heard me hit on all these things multiple times, so we're going to get a different voice in here. Last time we had Casey on, it was a couple months ago. It was great reviews there, great success. So we're going to ask him about the draft, free agency, what have you. And then Reed Mouse on Monday, father of one, Reed Mouse, I should say. He's going to be on, and I don't know exactly what we're going to talk about with him. Mailbag, maybe? I don't know. Maybe just some Bengals conversation there as well. But I'm sure he has a lot on his mind. He hasn't been in front of a microphone in quite some time now, so he'll be on Monday. Looking forward to that. As always, stay on the lookout for what we're doing across social media. Follow us, Seabox Sports on Twitter. Follow me at StoneShields_. Follow the show at the Stone Shields, and we'll kind of keep this thing rolling. But appreciate everyone as always, and until tomorrow, take care, everybody.